What's up everyone? In this video I'm going to talk about my 5 favourite investing books that I massively recommend to anybody who wants to learn how to invest in stocks, how to beat the market as a regular person, and just about money in general. Now, just for future reference, whenever I say learn how to invest in stocks or learn how to beat the market, I'm talking about active investing or picking and choosing your own stocks, where our goal is to choose above average companies and beat the return of the general market. And the reason we're trying to beat the market is simple. If we wanted an average return, we could just passive invest in the S&P 500 or the ASX 200 and get about 10% return a year. So if we're trying to pick and choose our own individual companies, we at least want to get a better return than the general market, or what's even the point? So when I say learn how to beat the market, I'm talking about active investing, not passive investing. Now, there's nothing wrong with passive investing, but for me personally, I want to achieve a higher rate of return so I can retire when I'm 35, not 65. And to do that, I need to get at least a 15 to 20% compounded annual return. And that's where these books come into play. We have the ability to learn directly from the greatest investors in history, where they willingly shared their secrets and their methods that they use to beat the market year in, year out. They share all of their secrets and wisdom, and honestly, it's one of the best investments you can make for yourself. Now, I've put these books in order for how I think you should read them as a complete beginner, but each of these books is still brilliant on their own. Okay, so the first book on the list is Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Probably one of the most popular books of all time. This book doesn't really teach you any investing strategies, but it's still a really good book that teaches you some really important lessons about money. But if you already know about money and you understand the concept of making money work for you, then you can just skip this book and move on to the rest. So Robert basically talks about how his dad, who he calls his poor dad, didn't teach him about money as a kid. He believed in studying, finding a stable job and working hard. Yet, despite having a great job, poor dad didn't really know how money worked and he really struggled financially. Robert's rich dad was his best friend's dad, who also believed in hard work, but he believed in learning about money and having financial education. And rich dad was a millionaire despite dropping out of school. The main portion of this book is about Robert's early years. He tells us what rich dad taught him about money and how the rich make money work for them. He also talks about the mistakes that poor dad made that kept him in debt and kept him working until old age. The key takeaways from this book is that having financial education and knowing about money is so critical to not being trapped in the rat race forever. And just not being afraid to talk about money. Like with my parents, talking about wages or how much the mortgage was taboo in our household. And not being afraid to talk about money is key to understanding how to make money work for you instead of working for money. Overall, it's a great book for people who are just starting out with their financial education and want to learn some great life lessons about how the rich think about money, how to make money work for you, and little tax loopholes that the rich use to keep their wealth. But if you already know all this stuff already, just skip ahead to book 2. The next book on the list is one of my favourite books of all time. It's such a great book for investors of all levels, and it's the first book I would read if you're trying to learn how to invest properly. And that is the Dondo Investor by Mohnish Pabrai. Now, Mohnish Pabrai is one of the most successful investors of all time. His fund achieved like a 28% compounded annual return over 20 years. Absolutely smashed the general market. And in this book, Pabrai shares his wisdom on how to become a successful investor. He spends a great deal of time explaining what's known as the Dondo framework. He explains that the Dondo framework is based around the concept of making a risk-free bet. Something that I'm sure sounds attractive to everybody. I'm sure we'd all willingly place bets if the upside when we won was massive and there was little to no risk. 90% of investors believe, as the saying goes, that it's either high risk, high reward or low risk, low reward. And a bet with low risk and high reward just doesn't exist. Well, according to Pabrai, it does exist, and he shares some brilliant true stories of how various entrepreneurs became massively successful because they use the Dondo framework to find these mispriced bets. He explains himself so well and finds similarities in different aspects of business that we can use for our investing. Mohnish Pabrai is also an avid follower of the teachings of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, who adds that if they did not exist, there would be no Pabrai funds. One of the best parts of the book is how he talks about cloning great investors and how he's a shameless cloner. I mean, we've all been brought up to believe that being a copycat is wrong and you should come up with your own way of doing things. But Mohnish doesn't believe that. He believes in shamelessly cloning the best people in whatever craft you're pursuing. And he shamelessly cloned Buffett when he created Pabrai Funds, which was based exactly on the business model of the Buffett Partnerships, which was Warren Buffett's fund back in the 1950s. And he's had amazing success following these strategies, and he's compounded money at 28% per year. How does he do it? Well, he focuses on waiting patiently for a mispriced bet, where there's a massive potential upside and little to no risk. As he puts it, heads I win, tails I don't lose much. He has virtually the exact same investing style as Buffett, Munger and Phil Town, which is to buy a wonderful business that has a durable moat and buy it when it's on sale for a massive discount to its intrinsic value. Simple, right? Well, according to Pabrai, it is that simple. He pays homage to the master Ben Graham, who talked about Mr. Market and how he's an extremely emotional entity who regularly misprices companies relative to their intrinsic value, and then realizes his mistake and quickly corrects the price back up to its intrinsic value. And this is where Pabrai says that the mispriced bets can occur. And the bet is virtually risk-free because you're buying with an enormous margin of safety. So overall, I cannot recommend this book enough. It's such a good read, and Monish is an excellent teacher. I've also been watching his lectures on his YouTube channel where he regularly shares his wisdom with professors and students from universities all over the world. So I highly recommend watching them because they're full of wisdom, and the Q&As are actually really interesting. Having really smart people ask him difficult questions about his style of investing or just about investing in general. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link to his channel in the description box below. Okay, so moving on. The next book on our list is an absolute cracker, and that is Rule 1 by Phil Town. In this book, Phil Town takes you through his entire framework for how he picks stocks and how he beats the market. Like Monish Pabrai, his style is based almost entirely on the methods of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, except he actually breaks down the framework into 4 sections and explains them in his own brilliant way that's really easy to understand and follow along. If there was a single book showing you exactly how Buffett, Munger and Pabrai all invest, the strategies that they use to beat the market, and how we can apply those to ourselves, then this is the book to read. By the end of the book, you should have a fairly good idea of the framework that 90% of the best investors use, which, as you know now, is buy a wonderful business that has a moat and buy it when it's cheap and has a massive margin of safety. But Town actually goes into detail and tells us how to know if it's a wonderful business, the numbers that show it does in fact have a moat, and how to calculate intrinsic value for ourselves and give ourselves a nice big margin of safety. Like the Dondo Investor, it's a really easy read and you can easily chew through this in a few days. Rule 1 is easily one of the best investing books I've ever read, and I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to really dig into the framework and the methods of the best investors in the world. So book number 4 on our list is One Up on Wall Street by the legendary Peter Lynch. For those who don't know, Peter Lynch is one of the greatest fund managers of all time. He managed the Magellan Fund at Fidelity, where he turned 18 million into 14 billion, an annual return of 29% during the late 70s and 80s. And he wrote this great book where he shares all his experiences and his wisdom about why he was able to achieve such an amazing return. In the beginning of the book, he talks about the Wall Street oxymorons and how we as the little guy have a big edge over the big institutional investors. He says that most of the big money managers out there that manage mutual funds are extremely limited in what stocks they can own. And his success came from thinking like an amateur and buying the stocks that they overlooked. Now, he doesn't mean amateur in a bad sense. He's talking about what he calls the amateur's edge, which is using what you already know, whether through your hobby or your career, or anything that gives you insight into a particular company or industry. For example, I'm a massive gamer and I have been for years. Lynch would say I have an edge over Wall Street investors because I understand the gaming industry and, more importantly, the companies within that industry better than them. So his main philosophy is invest in what you already know and understand. Buy it when it's cheap or underappreciated, and the market will take care of itself. So like the others, Peter Lynch is a value investor, but his style is a little bit different from the other 3. Essentially, there are 2 different types of value investors. There's the Buffett, Munger, Phil Town and Pabrai way, which is to buy a concentrated portfolio of around 3 to 10 wonderful businesses, which all have really long durable moats, have an amazing management team, and they were bought when they were cheap. Whereas Peter Lynch is more of a Ben Graham style value investor, which is known as cigar butt investing. They don't care if it's a wonderful business. They just want beaten down businesses that are so cheap they either have to have a good return because they're so undervalued, or even if it's liquidated, the liquidation price is higher than the price you actually paid for the business. So if a business is trading for $100 million market cap, but if you sold all of the assets and the buildings you'd get 200 million, then that would be a good deal to cigar butt investors. It's called cigar butt investing because it's similar to finding a cigarette butt on the ground that has 1 or 2 puffs left in it. Those puffs might be rough, but at least they're free, and that's what these companies are. And the key is just to buy a whole bunch of them so that even if a few don't work out, the winners will outweigh the losers. And Peter Lynch in his prime owned over 1,000 stocks at once. Or as Buffett jokingly says, Peter Lynch owns more stocks than Buffett can remember the name of. Peter also states in this book that the biggest moves come from smaller companies, and that's where you'll find your 10 baggers. He breaks down how he categorizes different companies and what to expect from each of them. He then takes you through his research process for how he finds cigar butts and the numbers you need to look out for, and how to even know if it's a cigar butt in the first place. And finally, he teaches us the best time to buy and sell and how to keep track track of our investments over time. Overall, this book is full of amazing advice and I would highly recommend it. Even if you don't want to be a cigar butt investor, it's still good to know the multiple styles of value investing because it will broaden your overall knowledge and increase your investing IQ. Okay, last and certainly not least, we're up to the last book in our list. Warren Buffett himself states that this book is the best investing book ever written, and that is The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. So if this is the best investing book ever written, why isn't it first or second on the list? Why have I got it fifth? It has nothing to do with the quality of the book. In fact, it's by far the best book in the list. I'm sure the other authors would unanimously agree on that as well. The reason I have it fifth is this. The Intelligent Investor was the first investing book I ever read. I thought I knew a little bit about investing at the time and I thought it was going to be the best place to start. And honestly, I struggled to get through it all and take it all in as a beginner. It's just so vast and there's so much to take in, and it can be pretty overwhelming if you're a beginner and you don't really understand the terminology that he's using. I mean, it's like 600 pages of pure value investing wisdom and framework. I'm sure most of you are smarter than me, so you could probably make sense of everything right away, but on my first time through it, I probably took in like 10 or 20% of it. After I read the other books on the list, I came back to it and honestly it felt like I was reading a new book. Now that I knew the basics of value investing and I had a little bit of experience myself, I was able to really understand the book much better than when I tried the first time when I had no real investing knowledge or experience. There is no real way to summarize such a mighty book. So I'll just say that Graham covers literally every single aspect of how to be an intelligent value investor. He talks about the difference between active portfolios and passive portfolios and how to manage them. How to structure a balanced portfolio based on bonds and stocks. And chapter 8, where he talks about Mr. Market, and chapter 20 on margin of safety are absolutely brilliant, and I highly recommend putting a bookmark in those chapters so you can come back to time and time again. Because to this day his points still hold weight after nearly 100 years. Virtually all value investors talk about Ben Graham as the master. He was the person who taught Warren Buffett how to invest back in the day. And in books 2, 3 and 4, all of the authors pay homage to Ben Graham as the founder and master of value investing. Overall, I cannot recommend a better investing book. I just wouldn't read it first as a complete beginner as it's a bit much to take in. But once you know the basics and understand the lingo, it's a brilliant book. So that's it guys. If you want a reading list to learn how to invest like the best investors and learn the methods that they use to beat the market, then you won't do better than this little list. And finally, I have a little bonus for you guys that's completely free. As I'm sure you all know, Warren Buffett is the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And every year since 1965, he's written an annual letter to shareholders. And if you comb through those letters, there's some absolute gems in there. He always generously shares his wisdom and is completely transparent with his shareholders about his actions and his thoughts behind them. He outlines the things he does well as his mistakes and the reasons behind them. So if you want access to these letters, just type in Berkshire Hathaway Chairman's letters and you should be able to find the entire list. I'll also put a link in the description box below for you guys. If you guys have any book recommendations that you think I should read, please let me know in the comments down below. I'm always looking for new books to read. And as always, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you've watched the video all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this one, hit that subscribe button, tap the little bell there, and you'll get a notification whenever I release future videos. And if you guys want more, I'll put another video up there somewhere that I think you'll find interesting. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.